Trump is a fraud. That is the headline of a Washington Post op-ed piece today, and it is also the conclusion of another Washington Post op-ed piece today on the same page. Under the headline, Trump is a fraud, Michael Gerson, who was a speechwriter for President George W. Bush, says that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's defeat of Donald Trump in the government shutdown should be the final proof that Donald Trump is a fraud. Michael Gerson writes, the president was elected in part by giving his supporters an impression of business acumen. This was, in fact, the image carefully cultivated by book publishers and TV producers and by Trump himself as a presidential candidate who claimed to be a peerless negotiator, an unrivaled businessman, and an excellent manager. He lost the most visible and important confrontation of his presidency in negotiating with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi over the government shutdown. Michael Gerson goes on to catalog claims by candidate Trump that have been proven untrue, including the claim of being a self-made billionaire and the claim that he hires the best people. Gerson writes, no one can reasonably claim to believe in Trump's brand as it was sold in 2016. We have plumbed the shallows of his boasts. They are refuted lies. And whatever else the president may be, he is a fraud. Catherine Rampell's op-ed piece, which ran just above Michael Gerson's on the Washington Post op-ed page, stresses the complete collapse of candidate Trump's promises to coal miners about the coal industry. Donald Trump has blamed Obama administration regulations for a decline in coal production, but Catherine Rampell points out that the decline in coal production is now predicted to be much more severe than it was during the Obama administration, with U.S. coal consumption hitting its lowest point in 39 years during President Trump's second year in office. Catherine Rampell writes, Trump promises a vision of an industry from decades ago and then struggles to understand why he can't turn back the clock. She notes that the American steel industry is producing about as much steel today as they did 30 years ago, just with fewer than half the workers, thanks to productivity gains. So the steel jobs are not coming back to the United States because they are already here. And most of those steel jobs are now held by machines. The voting public is catching on to the fraud. For example, Donald Trump campaigned relentlessly on the size of the national debt, which he said he would eliminate as president of the United States. And of course, the Trump tax cuts have dramatically increased the budget deficit and the national debt. And so, according to a new Washington Post poll, on Inauguration Day, 50% believed that Donald Trump would do a good job on the federal budget deficit, and now 33% believe that Donald Trump is doing a good job on the federal budget deficit, which, of course, has gotten much, much worse under President Trump. The verdict is in on that piece of the Trump fraud. We will have more on the fraud of Donald Trump after a break with Austin Goolsbee and Jennifer Rubin.
U.S. Steel just announced that they're building 6 new steel mills.
U.S. Steel did not announce that they were building 6 new steel mills because they're not building 6 new steel mills. Yet another piece of the fraud of Donald Trump. Joining our discussion now, Austin Goolsbee, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors for President Obama. He's currently professor for economics at the University of Chicago, and Jennifer Rubin is back with us. Austin Goolsbee, there is so much to talk about in what Michael Gerson calls Donald Trump is a fraud, but I would like to talk about some of this economic data that I've just been reviewing, and it's hard to think of any area there where he hasn't made fraudulent claims.
Look, I agree with that, but you remember in the campaign, we had the conversation, and I said we needed to start following what I called the Trump policy directive, which is we should not spend any more time talking about Donald Trump's policy ideas than he spent coming up with them. And at the end of this sentence, we've already violated the directive.
That's right. Look,
throughout the campaign, it was totally obvious that what he was saying was complete nonsense, it's a fraud wrapped in quackery inside of a bamboozle. I mean, the things that he promised were self-contradictory, and now there were people that wanted to believe. And I think now, as various parts of what has been a strong economy start to slow down, we start to see some yellow lights, people even talking about the dreaded R word of recession. I think a lot of those people that wanted to believe are, by the end of his term, going to be acting like they never knew him, they had nothing to do with him, just like no one remembers having voted for Richard Nixon.
Jennifer, when I saw the headline in the Post today on the op-ed page, Trump is a fraud, I thought, first of all, well, you know, I've been saying that since 2011 about everything, starting with the birth certificate, and I've always thought that, you know, for decades before, observing him in New York life. But I did think, oh, this is an important piece. It's, first of all, elegantly written, as Michael Gerson's material always is, but historians are going to need this 50 years from now. They're going to need to see the present tense reading of just how much fraud there was, and I think columnists like you and Michael Gerson and others actually need to continue filing these things for history.
Yes, in fact, we often have this internal debate. Should we keep writing the same thing that he lied,
Yes.
he lied? And the answer is yes.
Historians are going to need it.
They're going
Yes.
to need it, and it's good to remind voters because they forget. I mean, the absolute ignorance. The man has still not learned the meaning of trade deficit. He still thinks that we owe China, you know, a check of billions and billions of dollars. His understanding of basic economics is non-existent. And then there's the thing he just makes up, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on trade, whether it's on the biggest recovery ever, which is patently untrue. He's been lying his whole life. This is no different than Trump U. Instead of selling admission to his university, he sold votes, and he conned people out of their votes. So this is not new, but it does become more and more troubling because for a while, frankly, he could coast on the record of Barack Obama, who handed him a very good economy, and it continued on sort of in cruise control. Every president gets to sort of reap the benefits or carry the burdens of the president before. But now Trump is making decisions, and oh my gosh, things are going off the deep end, whether it's shutting down the government, losing billions of dollars, whether it's starting trade wars, whether it's running up a huge debt. These are things that he does that he won't acknowledge that actually have real-life ramifications. And I think it's different for some of these Trump voters when it's their paycheck that they've missed now 2 times in a row, when it's their small business that isn't being patronized by government workers. Suddenly all this becomes much more personal than somebody else's child at the border, than somebody else's livelihood or somebody else's sense of being the subject of bigotry.
Look,
when it comes
I absolutely
to
think
home,
that's right. That's deeply insightful. That's exactly right. That it's one thing if you're running a casino and whatever, and you told your investors something that was puffery and it wasn't exactly right. He's the president of the United States. He promised these people when they cut taxes for big corporations and very high-income people by $2 trillion, he promised the average family was going to get $4,000 higher income. And people are going to look around and they're going to be like, well, wait a minute. Hashtag, where's my $4,000? And I think that this is just going to keep building up. And the more you write about the lies, the puffery, the things that are completely not true, the more that just closes in. The window just closes and closes. And finally, like I say, they're going to pretend they never met him, they don't know him, and they're going to say, I hated that guy from the beginning.
Austin, before we go, let me ask you a campaign question for the Democrats running. They, most of them have some developing and very clear economic policies that they're advocating. Elizabeth Warren's tax policy. Others, I'm sure, are going to be coming forward with more and more economic policy arguments. But how much time, you were in the Obama campaign, strategically as an economic advisor in a campaign, if you were now, how much time would you say a candidate should devote to pointing out the fraud of Donald Trump when it comes to promising more coal jobs, promising more steel jobs?
I don't know. Look, I'm just a policy guy. You know, what do you ask me about message? But I think some effort on that is absolutely warranted. To just say, here's what he told you 4 years ago he was going to give you. Did he? Or do you? And I think that's, as the economy, if it slows down, I think that message is going to resonate with a lot of people because they're going to say, Yeah, wait a minute. He said he was going to change everything and drain the swamp, return the cold jobs, give us everyone health care for less money, never cut Medicare and Medicaid. He violated all those promises.
Austin Goolsbee and Jennifer Rubin, thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.